Super Bowl 59 is in the rear view, and man, we got a lot to discuss as a result. It is officially off season around these parts. And welcome inside the vault on this Monday, February 10th. I'm Bobby Trossett, as always, joined alongside my partner and co-host, Sarah Ellison. Sarah, we watched the Kansas City Chiefs be dismantled last night by Vic Fangio and the Philadelphia Eagles. 40-22 was the final in a game that was nowhere near what that final score suggests in terms of closeness. Let's be honest. This thing was a blowout, and as a result, the three-peat does not happen. The Philadelphia Eagles forever immortalized. Jalen Hurts gets his first Super Bowl before Burrow, before Lamar, before Josh Allen. We'll get into all that and more and the significance of it. But we're glad you're with us here on this Monday. It's brought to you by our friends at Manta Sleep. I'm back in Maryland after 6 days in New Orleans. We'll review my trip and get into 5 takeaways that we both have, Ravens-centric takeaways from last night's Super Bowl. Rashod Bateman blasted the Chiefs before this game was played on Friday on Radio Row, so we'll get into that, and I'm sure plenty more coming up. It's great to see you.
Good to see you. Based off your social media activity, it sounds like you had an awesome weekend when you were done with the work and got to play. So on the back end, I look forward to that. But let's jump into our takeaways. I mean, as you said, 22-40. What's funny is you had to say it wasn't even as close as it looks. Like if you didn't watch the game and you saw a 40-22, that already looks like a blowout, right? It already looks like one. And then you got to say, no, it wasn't even as good as it looked there. Because to your point, that wasn't just a loss on the Chiefs side or a win on the Eagles side. It was BTA. They just got a complete butt whooping. And Bobby, even though I had said I would prefer the Chiefs to win just because I didn't want another quarterback to dismantle Patrick Mahomes before Lamar Jackson did, even though I had said that, let me tell you, I did enjoy seeing it happen. I did enjoy watching the Chiefs have absolutely no answers. And I did enjoy seeing that, you know what? Patrick Mahomes, he is just a man, right? Like as I was watching him get beat down, this is my number one takeaway from the Ravens, okay? It's that Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs are indeed vulnerable. They're not kryptonite, okay? They aren't unbeatable. They aren't untouchable. It reminds me, Bobby, I grew up watching Rocky IV all the time when it was, Rocky against the Russian. And then remember when they start fighting and Rocky's able to hit him and it causes him to be cut and then he bleeds. And then his coach on the side, when Rocky comes back, he goes, you see, he's not a machine. He's not a machine. He's a man. And that's exactly what I felt like we watched yesterday, that it was like, quit making the Chiefs unattainable or untouchable. They are vulnerable. Because remember, back in 2020, Lamar said, oh, there are kryptonite, referring to Mahomes and the Chiefs. Now, Lamar did earlier this year when the Ravens matched up in week 1. He's like, he took that back. He's like, no, they're not our kryptonite. And I want the Ravens to continue that in their kind of mental space, Bobby, that it's like, get even further away from that idea that they're your kryptonite and instead envision Patrick Mahomes like this, like what we're seeing on the screen, where he's got that pouty face. Forget the crying Jordan. We've now got the crying Mahomes. Have that mental image in your mind. Have that mental image over there on the left where he's looking up and he's squinting at the scoreboard. He might be a little bit in pain. And it's just like, this is how you beat Patrick Mahomes, just like you beat every quarterback. You just keep hitting them. You never stop. And then you can also envision this, the way he's looking post-conference instead of being happy about winning all the time. Let's look at this Patrick Mahomes talking about how bad he feels.
We lose a Super Bowl, it's the worst feeling in the world. They'll stick with you the rest of your career. I mean, these will be the 2 losses that will motivate me to be even better for the rest of my career, because you only get so few of these, and you have to capitalize on these, and they hurt probably more than the wins feel good.
Yeah, so he said these losses in the Super Bowl, he now has 2 in the Super Bowl, they feel worse than the wins They feel worse than the win. So, and then let's just take, one more away. It's not just that Mahomes is vulnerable. Then you see Travis Kelce, and we know what he did to the Ravens in the AFC Championship loss last year. He left without taking any questions about retirement. They asked Patrick Mahomes about Travis Kelce's future. He said, quote, "I'll let Travis make that decision on his own. He's given so much to this team and to the NFL and been such a joy, not only for me to work with, but for people to watch." So I don't know if he's coming back. That would be great if he doesn't. But if he does, he'll be another year older. Bobby, the Ravens need to view the Chiefs in this light, that they're capable of doing to Mahomes and the Chiefs, that you're capable of sending Travis Kelce home, only taking 3 media questions, not wanting to talk about his future, going down with heavy footsteps. You envision doing that to them rather than seeing them as your kryptonite. That to me is your number one takeaway for the Ravens.
Well, they sent him home as a non-factor. Travis was a non-factor last night. He finished with 4 catches for 39 yards, most of which were, took place in the game when it was completely out of reach. As far as Mahomes, I think to summarize what you've laid out here in our opening monologue here, he looked human last night, right?
Mm-hmm.
He looked completely human, and you have to credit Philadelphia for that. And by the way, I appreciate the way that Mahomes, just from a competitor standpoint and sportsmanship standpoint, he got up there and faced the music last night. That was only part of his clip last night. I mean, he held himself completely accountable, blamed the entire thing on him. I can appreciate that as somebody who enjoys sportsmanship.
He should have with all those picks, right?
Well, yeah, and we're getting
although his offensive line could have helped him out a little bit more, but yeah, that's what hitting the quarterback does. It makes somebody as great as Patrick Mahomes start making uncharacteristic mistakes and picks, because now all he can think about is, am I about to get hit? Am I about to get hit? I got to move the ball down the field. We're not moving the ball. And then you start making plays that are uncharacteristic and make big mistakes that put your team in a hole. So to your point, I'm glad he fessed up to that, but he should have also.
Oh, of course he should have. But it's just, you appreciate that, but you also appreciate what Philadelphia was able to do to him. And you look at the breakdowns this morning of his footwork, I don't think he's ever looked that uncomfortable in a playoff game, maybe in any game throughout his NFL career. He was flustered from the jump. Vic Fangio, which we're going to get to in this Philadelphia defense in just a bit with another one of our takeaways, were able to successfully discomfort Patrick Mahomes with a 4-man rush. And that speaks to the dominance of Philadelphia's trenches on both sides of the ball, which we'll get to in just a second. But Mahomes' final numbers, we've alluded to it a couple times, 2 picks. He was 21 for 32, 257 yards. By the way, one of those picks, how about a rookie on his birthday, 22 years young, Cooper DeJean, not only picking off Mahomes, but taking it to the house for a pick 6. I mean, this was as dominant of a defensive performance in the Super Bowl that I can remember in my 30 years of life. And you have to credit the Eagles and tip your cap for what they did. They humanized Mahomes. They humanized the Chiefs. And ultimately, that dreaded three-peat, which we knew was absolutely capable of happening, does not happen, and would have been the first time in NFL history, and maybe, just maybe, the last time that we'll see an opportunity to do that for quite some time.
Absolutely. And so that brings us to Rashod Bateman. So we're all saying you want to look at the Chiefs in this type of way, that they're beatable. They're not just beatable, but you can dominate them. You can take Mahomes down, all of that. But you have a clip from Rashod Bateman. I don't know that I heard it earlier this week, but you might be able to refresh my memory. What did he have to say about the Chiefs?
Well, how about this? He goes on a fantasy show, a fantasy football.
Before the game.
This is before the show. This is live from Radio Row, by the way, and I'm kicking myself because I didn't even see him there. That just shows you how much of a who's who it is and how much you jam-pack Radio Row in a convention center. I didn't even know Rashod was on Radio Row. So anyway, this was courtesy of SiriusXM Fantasy Life. This is their show, SiriusXM. This was on the 7th. So the 7th was Friday. So in the final day of Radio Row. Okay. And Rashod Bateman was asked about this game. Okay. He made some headlines. Here it is.
Try to enjoy it with my fam, see if they'll lighten up the mood for me. I think they will, so I'm looking forward to that.
I think so.
Yeah.
What's your prediction for the game on Sunday?
I definitely want the Eagles to win, but we all know how that goes.
Everyone says the same thing.
We all know how that goes.
Why do you want the Eagles to win, though? Is it you just don't want to see the Chiefs win?
I just don't have respect for them anymore. And I think we all see why. And I'm never even that type of guy. I have no rivalries. Like, no matter if my college was this rivalry, I don't have no rivalries. But I feel like now being here is some stuff just go too far, and it affects other people. It affects other people's lives and affects people's outcomes. And I don't really like that. So, and Saquon deserves it.
Yeah.
Jalen deserves it. I really think Saquon deserves it. He's been through a lot in his career, and he's worked, really hard to get back in his position. And I like the underdog story. I kind of want him to win in New York's face. So, hopefully Saquon wins.
Sarah, I got to tell you, I think I counted at least 5 follow-up worthy comments there from Bateman because of how cryptic some of his words were. But the one that, of course, garnered the most amount of reaction and traffic was not that he wanted the Eagles to win, but it's that he doesn't have respect for them anymore, meaning the Kansas City Chiefs. I just don't have respect for them anymore is the direct quote. Again, he says something along the lines of, we all know why, right? Like comments that are very cryptic and leave it up for interpretation. Is it the official narrative, the favoritism narrative? What is it, Rashod? Is it the fact that you just don't like them? But obviously these comments went viral prior to the game, and that was on Friday on Radio Row.
Well, listen, his attitude towards the Chiefs is leaning towards what I'm basically saying here with the first takeaway is just not to see them as, the gods of the NFL or unattainable or untouchable. That said, you also don't want to go too far, right? You want to see that you envision yourself beating your opponent, but you don't want to overlook your opponent. When he says he doesn't respect them, I don't know. Is he saying, like you said, is it the refereeing, all that kind of stuff? He didn't want to go too far. That's what hit my mind first, is that he's got to be talking about the officiating. So maybe he doesn't respect the wins that they've gotten because the refs have been on their side. And I had said, last week, if the Chiefs win, it's going to be a close game. I said, if the Eagles win, it's going to be at least a double-digit win, because you don't want it close because A, these calls come up, right? And B, Mahomes does know how to win when the game is on the line. Like, I'll take him over just about anybody when it's like you have a minute left and you have to score, right? He just figures out how to do it. So I want them to not see them as unattainable, but I think you still have to respect their game personally. Despite what he's saying here about officiating and all that, I feel like you still got to respect them so that you're not overlooking them.
I was going to say, it's one thing to say, I can't stand these. I can't stand them.
Right.
I don't like
they're our rivals.
them.
We hate them, but yeah.
Yeah. Look, respect is a word we were talking about in our pre-show. Look, you got to respect what they've done, and you got to expect them to be back next year. I don't know about back in the big game, but they're not going to be going anywhere, barring something unforeseen. So the I don't know if that just was something that didn't come across the way that he wanted it to on a busy day in Radio Row. And I know, hey, when you got a mic in front of your face and there's people everywhere and you're sharing tables and gosh knows what, I get it. It's hard. It was hard to concentrate on Radio Row, but those were definitely some comments that warranted some coverage from us today. And that brings us to takeaway number 2, correct?
Before we get to that, just one quick note, which I know is not Raven-centric, but we had discussed the Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes kind of battle for GOAT status. And knowing that Tom Brady has 7 rings, and leading into the game, Mahomes had 3 with a chance for 4. And remember, we talked about what would a Mahomes win due to Lamar Jackson and Burrow and Josh Allen's legacies? And I said, really nothing, because he's just had all 3 of them, all their numbers, right? Burrow had the one win in the AFC Championship game several years ago, But to me, I said the person that it would hurt the most in terms of legacy would be Tom Brady. Because then Patrick Mahomes has 4 rings to his 7. But even though Mahomes would still have nearly double, I felt like you could at least start that conversation more, because then Mahomes would have a 3-peat, which Tom Brady never had. But the 3-peat didn't come, and Mahomes is still at 3, and Brady is at 7. And as many people have pointed out on Twitter, that in Brady's 10 Super Bowl wins, he had 21 touchdowns to just 6 interceptions, whereas Mahomes in his 5 Super Bowls has 7 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. So in just 5 and half the Super Bowl appearances, Mahomes has more interceptions than Tom Brady. So to me, Bobby, the GOAT conversation, because he didn't get the 3-peat, is officially too premature without the 3-peat to talk about. Mahomes has a long career still ahead of him, but for right now, there's got to be a pause on this GOAT debate until he gets closer to 5 rings or 6, because Brady has those 7. So right now, it's got to be on pause, in my opinion.
I'm sure Tom had to have felt pretty good about that pause last night, because I remember too that the two. Tom never lost this. Tom lost multiple Super Bowls, but he never lost one in last night's fashion, right? And so this was never close. I mean, you're sure the whole Falcons narrative and those jokes were being had at halftime, but the entire time I'm thinking to myself, there's just no chance. Kansas City has no chance, and I felt like it had no chance at the end of the first half. So yeah, GOAT status is preserved and safe for the time being. And I'll go back to what I was saying when we had these conversations leading up to the game in terms of legacies. To me, while Lamar and Burrow and Josh have a long way to go in terms of competing for this generation's GOAT at the quarterback position, I said it then and I'll say it now. If Mahomes won last night, he would have been that much more unobtainable for these guys, and in our case, on a daily coverage basis for Lamar. And so if nothing else, last night was, yes, Jalen gets it before all those 3, right? He gets his Super Bowl MVP, he gets his ring before those 3. But ultimately, I look at this in the long run and in the long game, it's still very possible if the Ravens are to sustain this kind of success and Lamar is to continue his career in this town long after this current contract, that he can still very much, when it's all said and done, be referred to as his generation's greatest. It's only 7 years in. There's a long way to go. But to me, that was a good step forward last night for him.
So that brings us to the second takeaway that we had from the Super Bowl. And that's the Ravens and Eric DeCosta must invest in the trenches. So, Bobby, we'll talk both about the defensive line and what the Ravens need to do there and what the Eagles did, and then we'll flip it over to the offensive line. So what do you got here on the defensive line?
Oh, that Vic Fangio was probably the MVP of the evening. Obviously, his players were the ones.
Not for me. It's those players.
You know what I mean? Just, well,
I could be the defensive coordinator of that defensive line. I mean, my goodness.
Well, strategy obviously is everything, but player execution ultimately allows strategy to look good the next day.
But the strategy, but the point is here, Bobby, is the strategy wasn't even complex. So that's why I don't give it to Vic Fangio, not even close, because he got to do a vanilla defense because he could. And you have it right here. They never blitzed. It was a 4-man rush. He didn't have to do anything exotic. He didn't really need to draw anything up. You didn't need to see any, safety blitzes or cornerback blitzes, none of that. His dudes just performed. I'm sorry. This is not a Spagnuolo got spanked last night for sure, but this was not a Spagnuolo special. This was I just have the better players, so I'm just going to go let them cook.
I give him credit for that. I give him credit for sticking to the basics and not feeling like he needed to take over and be the the headliner. So yeah, obviously, look, the players deserve all the credit in the world, and the pressure that they brought and the sheer force and winning at the point of attack was absolutely sensational. Mahomes was sacked 6 times, Sarah. He finished with a quarterback rating of 95.4, which again does not speak to a lot of what they were doing in the second half. Was just trying to put some points up on the board. Really, what you could have referred to as garbage time. And so, yeah, double-digit quarterback hits. You had Zach Bond, who was a player for you, multiple interceptions, right? DeJean had one, Bond had the other. I thought that Josh Sweat, we have a slide on him. I mean, he was just tremendous. This defensive front, as we saw December 1st here in Baltimore, they're a problem. They are an absolute problem. And in the trenches on both sides of the ball, Sarah, Howie Roseman and this Philadelphia front office has provided not only a blueprint to how to beat Kansas City moving forward, but how to sustain success in this current era. And as Jalen Hurts said it himself in his post-game press conference, defense wins championships. And while they hung 40 last night, did Philadelphia's offense, or technically they hung, I guess 33, right? Because DeJean had a pick 6. Last night was all about the defense and complimentary football, and that's what won.
Well, yeah. So getting back to like the trenches specifically, like it is insane to me that they blitzed him 0 times on 42 dropbacks. Because like Rex Ryan said it really well this morning on Get Up. He said, when the quarterback gets hit, not just the quarterback feels it, but the whole team feels it. Because you're an offensive lineman that just got your butt ran over. And then after you got ran over, the guy that you were supposed to defend against, your quarterback, you look back and your quarterback got demolished. So you feel that. Then as a wide receiver, you feel it because you're looking back. You're at the top of your route. You turn around, hope the ball is there. Oh, wait, no, my quarterback's on the ground. Like he doesn't even have a chance to get it to me. Then a running back is like, holy crap. Like, well, the Chiefs quarterbacks running backs didn't even get too much of a chance. Why they didn't run the ball more, I'll never know. Josh Sweat, who they drafted in 2018. I mean, these guys are the guys that they've drafted. They didn't have to go out and spend all this money. Josh Sweat generated a team high 6 pressures on 34 pass rushes. And he had a career high 2.5 sacks. He had 2.5 of those 6. This is according to Next Gen Stats. Sweat registered 4 of his 6 pressures on early downs, including every one of his sacks. Like, I'm sorry. Then Jalen Carter here is just like, this is the one I remember watching the TV and just being like, oh, just like Patrick Mahomes you got one defensive lineman. And again, just 4. You're just rushing 4. The offensive line doesn't have to worry about any extra guys coming from like disguised places. You know where it's coming from, but you have pressure on the edge. So he comes around and hits Mahomes' arm, which causes him to fumble. But then Carter comes in and he's like, yeah, no, I'm going to make you feel this even more. It's not enough to just strip the ball from you and create a turnover from your blind side. I'm also going to come right up the middle to make you feel it, and just hits his hand to the face. And he's like, you know what? We're up so big, even if they call a flag. And the whistles did. The refs swallowed their whistles. I mean, Mahomes got beat up. You want to know how you beat a rookie quarterback? You want to know how you beat a quarterback that has 3 Super Bowl rings? You beat him up. And it's insane to me that they did this with just a 4-man rush the entire game. I mean, and they do it. They've got Sweat, Carter. When did they draft Carter? Let me get this up here. Jalen Carter, they got in 2023. He's brand new. And I could talk about, that could be another takeaway, is you just got to keep drafting. And that is what the Ravens try to do too. Everybody's begging the Ravens spend all this money. I mean, these guys are all drafted guys. Sweat, Carter, you mentioned DeJean, Cooper DeJean, he was drafted. Quinion Mitchell, he was drafted. I mean, they're just drafting gems from on the defense all over the place, which Ravens fans often poo-poo, Eric DeCosta and the Ravens for doing. Now, you got to do it. You just got to do it right.
Oh, remember, too, you just mentioned a couple of guys that, yes, were drafted by Philadelphia, but were literally drafted last April, and Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. They got a pair of rookie corners that are Super Bowl champions now. And in Cooper's case, on his birthday, like I referenced earlier on, not only a Super Bowl win, but a memorable play that he'll be able to sign autographs about and probably be recognized for the rest of his life. Guy hasn't even played he's now played one full season in the National Football League. So I think you have to put Philadelphia's front office, led by Howie Roseman, up there with anybody. He is as aggressive as it gets when it comes to trading. He does not miss. He and his team, his personnel and scouting department, don't tend to miss all that often in the draft in April. And like you said, there's a lot of homegrown players. Now, the Ravens take a lot of pride in that as well, that have been key contributors throughout this run for Philadelphia. And, remember, they had unfinished business. This was the second time this matchup happened within the last 3 seasons. And here's the thing about Jalen Hurts. We're going to get to him in just a bit as another takeaway as it pertains to Lamar. Sarah, you could argue that he's had 2 of his best career games when it's mattered most, and both of those have come in the Super Bowl. So we'll get to the significance of that. We do have a Man to Sleep read in if you have anything else along these lines.
Let's finish up the trenches. Do you mind before we'll do that?
No.
So this is great. So I think we'll hit Manta right before we hit to our point 3. But Gordon McGinnis of PFF, he said it so well. He said the other contenders in the AFC are about to invest heavily on the defensive line, and it's the perfect draft to do so. Don't think the Chiefs are anywhere close to done, but if Buffalo, Baltimore, etc., don't see that as the best way to win a single elimination game against Mahomes, then, he's absolutely right. This is how you'd have to do it. You want to beat Mahomes, you beat him up with a tough defensive line. And in Baltimore, there are some pieces, but we've been saying it. Ravens Twitter's been saying it. The Vault audience has been saying it. Chat has been saying it. The Ravens need to find another game wrecker. Now, Nnamdi Madubuike is a great piece. And I know he didn't have as many sacks as he did last year in his contract year, which was double-digit sacks. And, of course, it comes at a time where the Ravens are going to have to pay him. But check this out. In this season, including the playoffs, this is a graphic from before the Super Bowl. Okay? Nnamdi Madubuike saw the 3rd most double teams of anybody, of any pass rusher. You got Jalen Carter, who I just showed, with his hands to the face to Patrick Mahomes. He was double teamed 279 times. Kobe Turner for LA was 242. And then there's Nnamdi Madubuike at 233. Chris Jones, who's a game record, only 219. That's according to ESPN Analytics and Next Gen Stats. So that's great if you got a man in the middle who they're double teaming the 3rd most in the league. That means that your edge rushers should be eating. Or if you're able to add another dominant guy on the edge, then we can see Madubuike going back to eating. Okay? And so that's why the draft strategy, free agency strategy, whatever, beef up the defensive line, because you just saw how you can rattle Patrick Mahomes. So and Bobby, we'll get into it more as we head into the draft. We will be looking at who the game wreckers are, whether it's a guy on the interior or on the exterior. I don't care. Team them up, because you got a nice little solid base. You've got KVN coming back. You got Odafe Owe going into his 5th-year option. You've got Justin Madubuike here. Michael Pierce is under contract. I mean, maybe some are saying maybe you cut him to clear cap space, but you got him there, and you've got Travis Jones. Add another demolisher. You've got a good foundation. They got to find that game record to pair with these guys.
Yeah, this just to reiterate Gordon's takeaway, I think just sums it up perfectly, right? And Gordon was actually, he was like, I never told you this, but he was like 2 tables over from me all week long last week. So it was good to catch up with him a little bit. I know we had him on the show in years past, but yeah, the contenders will absolutely have a clear mindset after watching what Philadelphia did so successfully last night. And like you mentioned too, with Jalen Carter commanding that kind of attention, my gosh, did it open up so many opportunities for his peers. And you mentioned the numbers on Josh Sweat. What about a Milton Williams? Anybody know who Milton Williams is? Big number 93, defensive end for Philadelphia. He had 4 tackles, 3 of which were solo, 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, and a quarterback hit. I mean, you can go up and down this box score right now of defensive players who ate last night, in large part due to, yes, Jalen Carter's presence, but just the relentlessness with which this defensive front plays. And that they set the tone early. It's funny, in that opening quarter, you're thinking to yourself, this is going to be a defensive game, like 1st to 20. Right. Then all of a sudden, the floodgates just opened up and Mahomes started turning the ball over, and it was good night from there. So,
and on the flip side, Bobby, so while we saw Patrick Mahomes getting beat up, Jalen Hurts, one of the reasons why he had such a good game is because he had the cleanest pocket. Like, there was nobody anywhere near to him. And obviously, he's also got, Saquon Barkley back there. And they were focused on making sure he wasn't going to break out. They were like, okay, Jalen Hurts, you beat us. And then he went and did that. And so on the flip side, it's not just to beef up the defensive line. It might be even harder to do it on the offensive line because the Ravens defensive line are all set to come back. You just got to add a piece or 2. On the offensive line, you've got Ronnie Stanley, who is your starting starting left tackle. And then you had Patrick McCary, who was your starting left guard. They're both unrestricted free agents. I had Brian McFarland on the show last week. I don't think you're on that episode, Bobby, but he doesn't think they're going to be able to bring back either one. He just hasn't seen it. Now, maybe the Ravens can, but they're going to have work to do because they either for sure need to get Ronnie back or you need to get somebody at Ronnie's caliber. And then maybe you say, okay, move Roger Rosengarten over. Fine. Then you got the right tackle to fill. Either way, you want Lamar Jackson being able to breathe the way Jalen Hurts got to breathe. You got his running mate. You've got Derrick Henry, the way Jalen Hurts has Saquon Barkley. So you got somebody who people are going to have to worry about, but the offensive line has to be there too. So Bobby, I'm sure people are going to be asking again this offseason, should the Ravens get this wide receiver? Should get this tight end? And those are all legitimate questions. But to me, priorities are everything. And where you spend the most resources are everything. And it's got to be inside the trenches.
Look at Philly. I'm sure you guys have seen this graphic before. The offensive line, average height, 6'6", average weight, 338 pounds. That's the tallest and heaviest offensive line in Super Bowl history. So it paid dividends for Philly. It's funny. Saquon was on one of his many post-game interviews last night. I think it was Chris Berman who asked him, how do you see? Like, how do you see over that? Yeah. 6'6", 338 is guys that he's running behind. And yet, man, we'll get to Saquon later on. What a stellar first year in Philadelphia for him. But yeah, it's clear. Just sheer mass, sheer force is what Philadelphia cultivated, and it paid dividends for them last night in pass protection and ultimately getting the run game going a little bit here and there, even though they only finished with 135 yards on the ground. And Jalen Hurts outrushed Saquon, which, again, we'll get into some of the significance of that in just a bit. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Manta Sleep. It's the official sleep mask partner of both me and Sarah here inside the vault. I know our families use these sleep masks as well. And having spent the last week or so in New Orleans, man, it's great to have on the road as well. You're looking at the Manta Sleep Mask Pro, for example. That's what I rock. It gives you true 100% blackout for a deeper sleep. You've got C-shaped eye cups built in for unbeatable side sleep comfort if you prefer. You've got zero pressure applied to your eyelids or lashes and advanced materials and ventilation for unmatched breathability. If you go to mantasleep.com and you find something you like, at checkout, you can use our discount code. That's VAULT10. It'll get you 10% off your next purchase. And again, this Manta Sleep Mask Pro, what you're seeing on the screen, is one of the many that they have available to you. You can click on the link that we have included in the show notes or in the video description. It'll take you right here where you'll find some of their best sellers like the Sound Mask, which has the built-in Bluetooth feature, the Manta Sleep Mask Pro, a bestseller that we just had up on the screen for you, the Silk Mask, the Sleep Mask, sort of the OG options for you, and plenty more, including non-sleep masks as well, like the white noise machine. So plenty to offer. We want to continue to thank Manta Sleep for the opportunity to work with them. And again, it goes a long way for our brand sponsors. If you support them, you're supporting us. You can use our discount code VAULT10. Learn more by visiting the show notes and also the video description. Should we get to some super chats before our next takeaway?
Yep.
We'll begin with Truth Bearer, who says, let's go. You all believe me now when I say Lamar can still catch Mahomes for best quarterback of this era. Truth, you and I are on that. It's going to take a lot. But last night was a nice step towards that potentially still being the case. Since Jalen Hurts gets it first, and that'll, again, that's segueing to where we're heading next in just a bit. But I'm with you, Truth. Christopher Brown.
The Chiefs without league assistance via refs.
Angie says refs are protected forever after yesterday's game. Yvette.
Oh, like Andy R. said, if Harbs was not dancing with his players, he should not have been play Santa and other characters. Go Ravens, take notes, keep running your game, #Vault.
Not sure what she's referencing there with Andy Reid's comments, but thanks, Yvette. Angie Carr says Mahomes won't surpass Brady. Three-peat will never change an 0-2 record against him. Lamar will be the first to three-peat. Calling it. Shannon said it best. Once Lamar gets his first, the pressure will be gone. Shannon Sharp's comments from a couple weeks back. Isaias.
Good morning to you both. I feel more confident in this organization because we know what we must do now.
Asmodeus, Richard checking in with a $20 spot. Build from the trenches first. EDC has been great, but the lines haven't been. I like our playmakers, but trenches affect timing. This isn't new. Tampa did the same thing with a four-man rush, yet no one woke up to it. Hope they do now. Dre Dog.
A hurt Ojabo in the second round was definitely a bad look for EDC.
They took a flyer on him. He was supposed to be a top 10, top 15 pick, tears his Achilles on the pro day, and it has not panned out yet for
Neither
the
has Voorhees. So both of those, let me get him hurt at later rounds. So we'll see what Voorhees does this time around, but neither one of them have panned out yet.
And Voorhees was day 3, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was late.
Late.
I'm okay with that, though. Like a late pick that you second rounder, a little bit more of a gamble.
For sure. That was big time gamble. Dev James 25 says Chris Sims said the Ravens had the roster talent to not be overwhelmed by the Eagles, unlike the Chiefs or Bills, but Ravens beat themselves. Kobe Pruitt.
I doubt EDC would trade cost-controlled draft picks for Crosby when the team is going to need to reset the market at safety and center very soon. Sweat and drafting Mike Green makes the most sense.
And Angie Carr wondering what we talked about last week. Would you put a package together for Myles Garrett or no? Meaning the player in Cleveland who the Ravens see twice a year who requested a trade last week. Probably not going to be feasible, Angie. We got into the specifics last week, but we'll see.
But I would put together an offer. There's just a lot of obstacles.
Takeaway number 3.
Takeaway number 3. Here we go. Get ready. Brace yourselves for Jalen Hurts to be ranked ahead in quarterback rankings ahead of Lamar Jackson for 2025. In fact, and I'm just talking about 2025 rankings. I'm not talking about who's best overall. I bet some people will say, hey, I'm going to put Jalen Hurts above Patrick Mahomes, right? Why not? And I'm not talking about one of those rankings that it's like, who you drafting today? Because I still think people would take Mahomes over Hurts. But if we were talking about going into the 2025 season, quarterback rankings, he could be number 1 or often number 2 on the list. And then people will be fighting for 3, 4, and 5 with Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow. Bobby, you and I discussed this because last week or 2 weeks ago, I'm losing track of time now, Cam Newton was on First Take. And the question that was posed to him was at first posed, would you trade a Super Bowl appearance for your MVP? I would never choose an appearance where you lose for an actual MVP that you won. I would never do that. But along the way, the conversation kind of changed, and it was, would you trade your MVP for a Super Bowl? And he said no. So that kind of launched this bigger conversation, Bobby, of where do you rank Jalen Hurts with all these other quarterbacks not named Patrick Mahomes? Both you and I said, for Jalen Hurts to leapfrog these 3 that are always like fighting for that spot behind Patrick Mahomes, in order for him to leapfrog him, it wouldn't just be that he has to win. It would be that they would have to win big with a lot of points, and he would have to be a main driver. And Bobby, he accomplished that.
He did.
He was 17 of 22, only had 5 incompletions for 221 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, a quarterback rating for 119.7. And he added 11 rushes for 72 yards and a touchdown. And, you know, the Chiefs had the correct strategy, which was, we're not going to let Saquon Barkley destroy us. We're going to say Jalen Hurts, we're going to take him mostly out of the game, and you're going to have to beat us. And Bobby, if the Chiefs had been told, hey, you're going to keep Saquon Barkley to less than 100 rushing yards, he had 57 rushing yards on 25 attempts for a 2.3 yard average and no touchdowns. If you told Steve Spagnuolo, hey, this is what your strategy is going to get you with Saquon Barkley, he'd be like, sweet, we're going to win. This is the right strategy. We're going to win. Because they dared Jalen Hurts to beat him, and he did. He absolutely, absolutely did. So now, I'm going to get into some of the comments of people talking about where he ranks. Do you have any more thoughts on that, of just how not that they just won and won big, but that he was a main driver?
The dude's he rose to the occasion.
Yeah.
You know, he, like I said earlier on, he's now played 2 of his best career games when it's mattered most in the last 2 Super Bowls that he's played in. 2 of the last 3 Super Bowls, Jalen Hurts has been elite. And so, yeah, you did bring this in from Robert Griffin III, who made these comments prior to the game. And he said if Jalen Hurts and the Eagles win the Super Bowl, which they have now, he won't be in the same category of Lamar, Burrow, Josh. He'll be in a category above them in the one that matters most, Super Bowl champ. With all due respect to anyone who thinks differently, F out of here. Hey. Now, he just quote tweeted this, and I have it right here. We'll do a screen share feature. And he quote tweets himself now that the game is over and says, Jalen Hurts haters are big mad. Jalen is not in the same category as Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson. He's in a category above them where it matters the most. He's a Super Bowl champion. Better player? No. More talented? No. But you will respect his ring and his story. That from RG3.
That I think is fair. Is he a better player? Like if you had a draft and you put Lamar and Jalen, I'm still taking Lamar. But if we go back to the question that was posed to Cam Newton when they said, would you trade your MVP for a Super Bowl win? And he said no. That's because a lot of guys have Super Bowl wins, but they're not like the main reasons, right? But as a quarterback, I would 1,000%, and may I be so bold as to speak for Lamar Jackson at this point. I usually refrain from this. I do not like it when people speak for Lamar, but I will be a little bit more bold this time around. Do I think Lamar would trade his regular season MVP for a Super Bowl MVP and a ring? Yeah, I do. I do think he would. And I think anybody who's being honest with themselves would trade a league MVP for a Super Bowl ring and Super Bowl MVP. So listen, I think
I don't
he's
even
right.
think you needed to set that up so carefully.
Well,
listen. He's made it pretty clear, partner, over the years. I think you could stick your neck out there on that one.
Well, I just did. I just wanted to point out I didn't want to be a hypocrite because I don't like it when people speak for him. But on that one, I think he's given us enough indicators that that's where he would go. And I think what Robert is saying here is true. He's like, is he the better, or is Jalen Hurts the better player? No. Is he more talented? No. But you will respect his ring and his story. Yeah. And he didn't just outplay Patrick Mahomes yesterday, but he did it in that first Super Bowl matchup. But Mahomes got the win.
Yeah.
But you know, Hurts had the better game, and so there's that one. And then we can go back to here. Ryan Clark. Here's what he had to say after the game yesterday. He said, Josh, Joe, and Lamar have had their shots at the throne. Joe beat Patrick, and Josh had his days, but none of them have stood up across from 15 like Jalen Hurts. Maybe he's never mentioned in the same breath as the others, but for now, there's a convo only he and Patrick Mahomes are in, which is Super Bowl MVP. When the football historians sit back and watch their matchups, he needed to clarify this. He wanted to make sure everybody knows that he's talking about their matchups. When you watch their matchups, it's going to be hard for them to tell who this era's guy was. Hurts has just been better. Congrats to the Eagles. So he's referring to at the end because he's saying it's going to be, historians looking back, it's like, who's going to be the guy of the era? Well, obviously it's Patrick Mahomes thus far. But when you look at their matchups, Hurts has outplayed him in both those Super Bowl games, even though they're split in the wins. And so, again, I don't know that I'm drafting Hurts above these guys, but I'm also not going to punish him the way people have punished Lamar for having Derrick Henry in his backfield. Like, for sure, it helps Jalen Hurts that his defensive line is beating up Patrick Mahomes, right? It for sure helps Jalen Hurts that he's got Saquon Barkley, although, you know, the Chiefs could have used their running backs a little bit more yesterday. That's on their coaches. But I'm not going to punish him for having a better overall team than I think maybe these three other quarterbacks have had when they faced Patrick Mahomes. I'm not going to punish him for that because he also played well when his number was called upon. You know, he had those numbers that we talked about, and he had deep passes, he had short passes, he ran with his legs, like he did everything that he was supposed to do. So he likely will be ranked ahead of these three guys for the 2025 season, but the era isn't over yet. It's just not. But here's what they had to say. Stephen A. Smith's reaction to Ryan Clark's tweet right here.
RC said, I dispute not a syllable of what RC uttered. He's in a conversation that Joe Burrow is not in, that Lamar Jackson is not in, that Josh Allen is not in, and that is Super Bowl MVP. And by the way, Jalen Hurts has played better against Patrick Mahomes than any of them have. Even with the sensational performances that Josh Allen has put forth, it still resulted in an L because he couldn't do what Patrick Mahomes ultimately was able to do against his squad. That is not the case with Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts didn't get the ball back in Super Bowl 57. They had a lead with, a tie score rather, with about 5 minutes and 15 seconds left, and they never got the ball back. He gets a second go round, and they obliterate.
All right, so no lies there, Bobby. And then also last week when we talked about, like, is Jalen Hurts on their level? It's like, well, he's really just not even asked to. He's not even asked to, so he doesn't have those rushing yards. He doesn't even have those rushes. Well, here he is being like, told you, media, told you I could do this. I just haven't been asked to.
Over the course of our year, you guys have heard me say it, just because we don't doesn't mean we can't. And when you hear a statement like that, I think it always comes down to, what is your mission? And why are you doing this? I'm doing it to win. I do it to win.
And that's it. That's it, right? You do it to win. And he said all year long, like you said at the top, just because I don't doesn't mean I can't. And in a lot of ways, that was Lamar Jackson in the Greg Roman era, right? Where it was just like the handcuffs were not removed. And so it's been more removed. But now it's up to the Ravens to surround Lamar the way the Eagles have surrounded Jalen Hurts. And the Ravens have gotten better for sure with the weapons. but you got to continue with those trenches, which we've already mentioned before.
Dude's a winner, man. That press conference right there just shows like the security he had, the self-security, the self-confidence, the leadership. We all know his story from Alabama to Oklahoma. The dude's a winner. The dude's an absolute winner. And so I think a lot of those points stand from Ryan Clark, from RG3, and now obviously it's just going to take one of these guys that's in that second tier to break through. Mm-hmm. And obviously we hope that that's Lamar and the Ravens first to ultimately say something about that. And we'll get to their Super Bowl odds for Super Bowl 60, which is coming up in just a bit, a year from now in San Francisco. I'd be lying if I said I don't already. It's so fun. I remember these exact feelings and thoughts coming back from last year in Vegas, which we tag teamed together, of course, and it was an awesome experience. But you get back and there's just like, you can only imagine what it's like for the losing team, by the way, like feelings this morning, waking up and having to get back to life. But when you come down off the high of Super Bowl week, it really is this reset that's needed. And so I'm trying to like reprogram myself to get excited about something. And I'm like, I mean, it's a long way from now, but San Francisco next year, Levi Stadium, maybe the team that we cover on a daily basis is there. So anyway, I'm trying my best over here, partner. I'm trying.
I like it. Well, takeaway number 4, I think the Eagles would have beaten anyone, including the Ravens and Bills. And I say that because there were some tweets last night, both from people talking about the Ravens and the Bills. So Josina Anderson, who was just on the show with you last week, as you caught up with her at the Super Bowl in New Orleans, she tweeted last night in the middle of the game, would Lamar Jackson's Ravens have had a better showing so far as the AFC representative in the Super Bowl? Patrick Mahomes, and then she went into how he was getting beat up, Patrick Mahomes. Then there were a ton of tweets from the Bills side. There's just one from Bob Plankers who said the Bills would have been a better game. So I think it's probably, maybe would the Bills have given a better game? Maybe. But I know the Ravens would have, because we just had this matchup a little over a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, and the Eagles won by 5 points. So would it have been a better game? Probably. But I couldn't stand here and confidently say that the Ravens would have won. Like with the way the Eagles were dominating and just destroying that Chiefs offensive line, I think the Ravens offensive line is probably better than the Chiefs. Not probably, it is. Like that's been their Achilles heel forever. But I still have a hard time thinking that the offensive line would have kept Lamar clean the entire time. And Marlon Humphrey, this was last week. He said, I thought the Eagles were the best team we played this year. And the Ravens played both the Chiefs and the Eagles. And then a follower of his replied and said, yeah, the Eagles were the only team that, quote, truly beat us, the Ravens. Marlon Humphrey replied, bingo. The rest, we beat ourselves sadly. So you've got the Ravens, all-pro Marlo out here saying that the Eagles just straight up beat them. It wasn't the Ravens shooting themselves in the foot. Like they were just the better team. So would the Ravens have given a better team to the Eagles? History says yes, because of what we saw. But I'm still not sure. Bobby, I can't confidently sit here and say, oh, this Ravens team would have beaten the Eagles.
I can't either. I went back to some notes from that December 1st game that Marlon's talking about right now. And I definitely remember thinking that night and going into the bye that it was a self-inflicted loss. They left 7 points off the board. Justin did. And when I say they, he had 2 missed field goals that night and a PAT. What's that?
I said, that's true.
So I do remember that being a significant factor. Justin had a really tough night going into the bye. Let's see. I also had some notes here. The Ravens offense went 8 straight drives without scoring a touchdown. I remember Nelly had a significant drop that night, Nelson Aguilar. Lamar never found a rhythm. He had multiple fumbles, both of which were recovered. But again, that just kind of spoke to the lack of polish. He had some overthrows. He was 6 for 15 on 3rd down and a garbage time touchdown away from being shut out in the second half. And then, you know what I wrote? I said, these are like my post-game notes that I do. This isn't a group that looks poised to make a Super Bowl run 5 weeks from now. That's what I wrote. So clearly, though, what did they do after that? They ripped off, the wins that they needed to close the regular season down the home stretch and ultimately found a way into the postseason and whatnot and won a wild card game and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, despite those, we all know seeing a team twice usually looks very different. And so I would agree with you. I don't know what to hang my hat on in terms of confidence that it would have been different. Maybe not a blowout, but would have been a different outcome than it was December 1st.
Man, you're like reminding me of those Tucker misses in that game. For some reason, I had put him into a different game and kind of gone along with Marlowe here. I mean, I still feel like the Eagles were the toughest team, like just watching, right? The way it was just so tough to get every single yard, which is why they had to rely on Tucker, right? And so that's why I remember the Eagles being tougher. It's because the Ravens just seemed to be able to move the ball against other teams.
Yeah.
And then they were good in the red zone. But on this one, yeah, like they had to rely on Tucker because they weren't able to get as close as they normally do. So that's a good reminder. So there was some shooting themselves in the foot a bit.
I was going to say, just to reiterate, 7 points.
Yeah.
2 missed field goals and a PAT were left off the board in a game that was 20. You have the final score here, 24-19. So, By the way, another note, I just scrolled down and I didn't see it the first time. Quote, Philly's defensive front bullied Baltimore.
Yes.
That's what I have here. So
I remember that distinctly.
So clearly a lot of these things that we saw play out last night, we already had seen in Baltimore December 1st prior to the bye.
That I definitely remember that. But now that after watching the Chiefs, there are levels to bullying because the smackdown they put on the Chiefs offensive line was not the same as the Ravens, and yet they dominated both, but there were levels to it for sure.
Yeah.
So
there you have it. Looking back at that matchup, and obviously we don't know. Who knows what would have happened last night? It's all for the purpose of the conversation. But what we do know, speaking of looking back, it was one heck of a first season for Saquan Barkley, the big free agency acquisition for Philadelphia. Wow. Over 2,500 rushing yards. That's the most ever in a season. And by the way, these numbers include the playoffs. 353 receiving yards, including, what did he finish with last night? He had 57 on the ground and 40 through the air. So, people think like, oh yeah, Jalen Hurts, the story is that Jalen Hurts outrushed Saquon, which he did. But, Saquon did chip in 6 receptions for 40 yards through the air. He had 20 total touchdowns. He was the offensive player of the year, first team All-Pro, third in the MVP race. And of course, one thing he definitely, Sarah, was not getting as a New York Giant, a Super Bowl champion. What an unbelievable acquisition, much like Derrick Henry was. And for Philly, it results in a championship.
Absolutely very good. So that brings us to the fifth and final takeaway. The Ravens Super Bowl 60 odds are really as good as anyone's. Here are the odds from BetMGM. They've got Philly first. Makes sense, right? They just won, so they're at a plus 650. Number 2, alone in the number 2 spot, is Baltimore at plus 700. Then they got Buffalo and KC at plus 750. Detroit at plus 850. So listen, to your point earlier today where you're talking about who's going to be the guy of this era and Truth Bearer's point. There's so much still ahead of the Ravens. And, as frustrating as it is the last couple of years, it feels like wasted opportunities, for sure. Wasted opportunities with the rosters that they had. And at the same time, you can look back at that as like ways to learn, but you can't dwell on it. You just can't, otherwise you're just going to keep repeating history. You just have to get the pieces in that are better. And the fact that, Jalen Hurts did take that away from Mahomes to go to 4 Super Bowl rings, it does allow the quarterbacks to kind of eat at each other, including eating at Mahomes. And so everything in the world is still ahead of Lamar and the Ravens to do some damage. You just got to let go of the past other than the lessons and move forward and just, again, try to do to Mahomes and the AFC before you even get to the NFC in the Super Bowl. You got to do to Mahomes what the Eagles did, and then you got to do it to everybody else too. You got to do it to Allen. If you can do it to Mahomes, you got to do it to Allen. You got to do it to Burrow, and that'll put you back on top because you have the quarterback to do it. You have the quarterback on offense. Now go beat up their quarterback.
You also have an all-pro player on defense in Kyle Hamilton, who joined your friend Kay Adams. By the way, I was trying to track her down all week, but
No, she's untouchable at the Super Bowl.
as you'd imagine, Kay, and it wasn't even to like potentially have on the show. It was more so to just introduce myself and say thanks to all the opportunities she's given to the show and whatnot. Get great promotion when you go on for the Vault. But she's a hot commodity, and her guest list was untouchable. I don't think anybody had the guest list that Kay had, but she did have Kyle Hamilton on the show, and she forced Kyle to sit next to the elusive Lombardi Trophy leading into the game, and Kyle had a hilarious analogy.
Why don't you want to touch it?
It's bad juju.
Why?
It's just, it's kind of like seeing your bride in her wedding dress before the day.
That's a perfect way to describe it. I didn't even think about it.
So maybe I shouldn't even look at it.
You don't even like that it's here?
Yeah.
I think maybe we should not have the Lombardi Trophy on set, though, if it makes players uncomfortable.
That's
look
great.
at him look at him trying not to make eye contact with the Lombardi Trophy.
Don't even look at it. Don't even look at it. Oh man. Yeah. Look, I get it. I get it. I'm sure too soon in a sense, or maybe he's just actually having fun with it. And that's a perfect analogy. So
it was a perfect analogy. And I do want to say this, both Kyle Hamilton and Kyle Van Noy or Rashod Bateman or whoever else we were hearing from, Ravens players. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bobby. We were at the Super Bowl last year. You were at it last year and this year. Just like Ravens fans, there's a different vibe this year coming off of that loss than there was from the AFC Championship loss. Remember, Kyle Van Noy couldn't even get out of bed, right? And then once he was out of bed, we saw him in his interviews. I mean, he was cool, but he was depressed. He was talking about how he couldn't get out of bed. There's a different vibe. There's it feels like both the players and the fans sense that they're closer, that they're again, just in their own way versus that AFC Championship game where it just felt like a bigger gut punch. It felt like a bigger gut punch. I feel like they're already in better spirits 2 or 3 weeks out from where they were. And so which makes me happy. Don't hang your head down low. Just come back with the vengeance, because every year you talk about coming back with the vengeance and you don't, because there was some heads hanging low. You got to put the past in the past, and you got to start working for that Super Bowl 60.
I think I kind of like how maybe it hurt just because they had an expectation that they were going to be there, but getting a little taste and going to the host city and feeling that adrenaline and feeling that moment of just pure, not only sense of urgency, but for the winning team, obviously, jubilation. I don't know. I think that can go. I kind of like that both Kyles and Rashod made their way to at least experience a little bit of Super Bowl week on Radio Row. And to your point, Kyle's spirits, and we were live when I had a chance to chat with him for a minute or two last week. He seemed like he was having a ball. He was there with his wife. He was doing the McCoy and Van Noy show. He was making his rounds along Radio Row. And I think you can take some positives from that, that just go there, experience it. Did you just see Jameis Winston, the amount of fun that he was having and how special, not only because of his time in New Orleans, but he literally was so captivated by the moment of being in a host city, which he spent the majority of his career, and trying to soak up what it meant to be involved in the Super Bowl. I think that's what maybe can be overlooked. This is the event of events. This is a global phenomenon. And so, when you don't get there and it's what you're working for and what you've sacrificed so much for, wow, I can only imagine the emotional whirlwind that not only the teams and the players that were, eliminated, but how about the way Kansas City, even though they've won the last two, what Kansas City and members of the Chiefs are waking up like today. I can only imagine what that feeling is like. So,
yeah, I mean, Mahomes said it. He said these losses hurt more than the wins have felt good.
There you go. I mean, that
hurt.
Right?
Yeah.
Right there. So
close out with super chats.
Yeah, we'll get some super chats and patrons in here. We appreciate you guys for being with us today. Teal, there's over 3,100 right now concurrent. So thanks for all the support. I believe we left off with Angie. So why don't you kick things back off with Tinsay?
It'd be deemed illegal if Jackson was on the Eagles.
Kobe, the media just bent over backwards to give Allen an MVP. It's hard to see them ranking Jalen 2. They will say 1 Mahomes, 2 Josh, 3 Jalen, 4 Lamar. Robert Smith.
Mahomes' Super Bowl loss performances have been abysmal. The GOAT debate needs to be shelved. Not on Brady's level, not even close.
Truth Bearer, Eagles game was before Lamar cussed him out. Lamar's mom cussed him out. He would have used his full speed in a dome. That would have been our game. Reveal, C. Gilmer.
Haven't replaced Suggs yet. No pressure, no rain. It's true.
Dre Dog, separation is one thing. Being able to beat guys flat out one-on-one at the wide receiver position is different. Making teams pay when stacking the box. Omni King.
That Eagles game was also the game Lamar got cussed out for not running by his mom.
Reveal says defense wins championships. We will just get close. And Paul.
Eagles cooked the Chiefs, and Bobby feels better. Check mark, check mark.
Yeah, I do. I'm finally healthy. I feel like I'm finally healthy.
Awesome.
Goodness gracious. I am tired coming off the week. I'm definitely tired coming off the week.
I was a little nervous about that. I knew that you were having fun. I was like, please don't have so much fun to where you regress back into being ill.
Yeah.
I was simultaneously happy, but like in mom mode for sure.
Oh, I'm sure. And my track record says that you should be in mom mode with me, let's be honest. But no, I did bring my antibiotics down there with me, and I think I spent about half the week on them. So it was good. And then I finally just felt like I didn't need them anymore, and I didn't like the way they were bogging me down. But I'm just about fully healthy right now. So It's good. The only thing I'm just working through is getting past the lull of the Super Bowl. It's the post Super Bowl week hangover, or whatever you want to call it, even though it wasn't alcohol related for me. Not to say that I didn't have alcohol down there, but it's just more about like, all right, what's next? I just try to find like, okay, what can I sink my teeth into now?
Yeah.
Because of how much goes into not only Radio Row, but just making sure that accommodations are taken care of. We don't have a network that just hands us accommodations for the week and flight credits and things of that nature. Like, I had to handle every single logistical aspect of this past week. And so a lot goes into it. A lot of effort is put into it. And what an awesome experience it was, which we can maybe get into that in just a bit. But Gordon C. and Andrew Simmons are this episode's patron shout-out supporters of ours. We appreciate you both. If you guys are interested this offseason now in signing up to be a part of the Vault Patreon community, a great way to do so is by visiting patreon.com/RavensVault podcast to learn more about what we're offering and maybe even deciding to support the channel for as little as $1.99 this offseason. We appreciate you guys. Thanks for all the support. You can visit patreon.com/RavensVault podcast to learn more. I did want to get one more quick hit in, if possible, Sarah, because this was news that came down last night, and it's very sad. My former Loyola professor and somebody who is beloved in this town and who worked for WBAL as a reporter for years passed away unexpectedly within the last 48 hours, and that is Tim Tootin. This man was one of my favorites. He was a Loyola professor. He then became a colleague of mine at WBAL. This is really surprising, sudden news, and I just wanted to send love to who he was, to his family, to his friends. Man, I was just DMing with him the other day. He was a supporter of our show. He watched our show and was a huge part of this community in Baltimore. So rest in peace to Dr. Tim Tootin, a former professor of mine and somebody who I know was Baltimore's best. So just wanted to kind of finish up there. And did you have any questions about my trip that you wanted to discuss or anything before we jump?
Yes. Did you go out with your Carolina Cam Newton girl again? Uh-oh. You can't tell if you're like super hopeful or super devastated.
You know how You know how you're supposed to catch flights, not feelings? You've seen that funny reference, haven't you?
Yeah.
I caught both this week.
Ah,
All right, I caught both.
caught feelings.
I caught both. I think she's absolutely fantastic. I don't think it's going to continue though. I think she got cold
Oh
feet.
man.
Here's my thing, and that I'm starting to observe about myself. There's something about I put myself into these situations with geographically undesirable women
Yes.
that it's this cycle that I'm in. Whether it's Madison, whether it's the girl that I was hanging out with in Syracuse during New Year's Eve. You can go on and on and on over the last couple years. I haven't had a lot of luck in the Baltimore area, which is why when I go on these trips or whenever I'm outside of Baltimore, I put a lot of effort into either putting my location on Hinge into that area or finding time to message back and forth mid-trip, which is definitely what I did this past week. So look, I just something dropped off after our first couple days. Communication kind of dropped, and I know her college roommate came in for the weekend to surprise her, so it ended up becoming a girls' weekend. So we never saw each other after back-to-back nights, Wednesday, Thursday.
After the Cam Newton party, you never saw her again?
Yeah.
Oh.
I know what you're thinking. I don't get the sense that it was sort of like, oh yeah, I'm gonna attach myself to this guy's hip for the night to get into the party. But what is up with this though? Why do I? Yeah. Now I'm not saying it's all that common for a guy to go into a work trip, find somebody that you clearly hit it off with, and then immediately fly her back to wherever you live the next weekend. I don't think it's that common. Maybe I'm expecting this to just happen and work out at some point.
Right.
But I got to tell you, what's definitely on my mind today, how long do I want to continue experimenting with the Baltimore dating scene? I am for real about this. This has been a cycle for me. At one point, am I going to have to, because I don't want to be single for who wants to be single for their whole life? At what point am I going to make a change? Because this has been a recurring theme for me. Well,
I mean, you'll make a change as soon as you see another avenue to meet women. I mean, all you're doing is trying to meet women. You're doing it. You're still trying to in Baltimore. It's not like you're not, you know what I mean? So I'll just say this, I did not have to date in the internet era, right? I never had a dating profile. I was married before that happened. I got married in 2000. When did I get married? I got married in 2007. So I got married in 2007. It's been almost 20 years. But I met him in 2005. So it has been 20 years since I met my husband. So I didn't have to, dating sites were just coming out. But if I had been in the dating era, well, before I say this, let me ask you this question, because I don't know this because I haven't been on these dating apps. When you go to New Orleans and you change your location, can they still see that you're from Baltimore?
No,
they can't see that.
There isn't an option. They can see where I'm from originally.
Yeah.
And so the way that I handled that, not to cut you off.
No, I asked a question.
When I made matches, when matches came in throughout the week, the first thing I wrote to these women was something along the lines of, hey, so-and-so, I'm in town for the Super Bowl this week. Would love to get together though and explore your town if you're interested. And I would literally, if I was really interested, I'd just drop my number right away. And a lot of them wrote back.
Okay.
So
but you're up front that you're traveling through.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that answers my question.
Yeah.
If I were dating on a dating app and somebody was coming in from out of town and I'm not looking for a relationship, I'm picking you because you're out of town. And I don't even know you yet. You know what I mean? And so when you say what's up with me and geographically what was the word you used? Geographically undesirable women?
You know it.
Yeah. So to me, it's they're looking for you. The girls that don't want a commitment are looking for the guys coming through for the weekend. That's what I would think.
It might have been it. She's 25, so she's 5 years younger than me. She just moved to New Orleans in August from North Carolina. She's on a 9-month contract working with Hilton downtown. And she told me the second night, and I can't remember if I said this on camera last week or not on Radio Row, that she did not expect to have as much fun as she did. And that kind of, now that I think about it in the way that you're putting it, it's probably a phase of her life that she's in, that because she even said, I mean, I reached out, I stuck my neck out here and I said, I was like, hey, all my buddies that I was working with for the week, Friday night or Saturday. Hey, all my buddies left for the weekend that I was, working with. They flew out. So I'm just chilling. I know you're with your friend, but would you want to get together? And she's like, it's definitely more of a girls' night, but I hope you enjoy the rest of your time in New Orleans. I really had an amazing time with you this week. And it's like, I totally respect that text because
she's up front.
She spent 6 combined hours with me.
Yeah.
And I'm in town for 24 more hours, and she just got surprised by her college roommate. With that said, if she was truly interested and committed, I would have been with her friends.
Right. Or she would have been like, let's keep in touch or something like that. Yeah. But my point is like, by you coming in from out of town, it's not just geographic. It's like the type of girls are like, yep, I want the out of town guy. The girls that want a commitment, they're like, I'm not going to go out with a guy who's from out of town. Like, what do I want to do that for? I'm looking for a commitment and I'm not going to do long distance. That's how I would be.
Here's the funny part. Here's the funny part that you're going to, and I totally see where you're coming from. I think you're right. I never put my eggs in one basket. I think you guys have probably realized that because of how much
for sure. Yeah.
I'm sure everybody's probably thinking in their minds, how much is this dude dating on a weekly basis? I promise it's nothing crazy, but clearly you guys, from what I've shared with you all for the last few months or maybe even over a year at this point, you notice that I keep taking swings.
Right.
And so while Jane Doe is the one that I'm really excited about, I did go on other dates and I met other girls throughout the week, but it just wasn't like I didn't feel as much of a connection. So it wasn't like I was just there.
There were no fireworks.
Yeah, exactly. I was kind of being cheesy about that last week, but it did feel right, but there was just something about the other ones that literally they came after I met her, and while I'm on those dates, I'm like thinking about, God, I got to get back with her. I got to get back on a date with her. I don't want to be on this first date right now.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, chat is telling me that I need to step up, but let me tell you this.
Step up and do what?
And hook you up with one of my single friends. We are in a different age bracket, first of all. I'm 45. Bobby is 30.
Flat.
So we're 15 years apart, number one. Number two, I live in Columbus. And we want to get a company meeting on the books, right? So you may be coming out to Columbus. But I moved out here 6 years ago with 4 kids. Do you think I've been meeting single girls? Like, all my friends are moms with kids. Like, we meet each other at the school, all that kind of stuff. So I'm like I do have like nieces. I have nieces your age.
Sarah, you're going to be like,
yeah. I'm just like, and by the way, I'm LDS, and most people don't want to marry other LDS people because there's a commitment there, right? Like, there's a commitment, let's be honest. And so I'm like, I have super cute nieces that are single, but like, Bobby knows, you know my life. So I don't know that you're ready for the LDS life.
You got me laughing right now because when we ultimately pick this weekend, half weekend, whatever it ends up becoming for Columbus, I can just picture it now. I send you my itinerary and you're looking at it and you're like, wait a second. We discussed an early Friday morning arrival so that we could do a show together in person next to each other in your studio.
Yeah.
Why did he extend the stay for 5 extra days? What is going on here? Bobby, meanwhile, over here sticking his hinge pin in downtown Columbus to see what's going on in Ohio.
You for sure should, though. And let me just say this. There's a part of me that wants you to come in on a Thursday night because I would want you, because I feel like you'd be willing to do this. My husband will not come. I want you to come to my all moms high fitness group.
Okay. You know I
You would do it, right?
You already know I would, yeah.
Oh, you for sure would. You for sure would. Like, you just be hanging out with all the 40-year-old women with our cardio, and I would like to see how much you can keep up.
You already know I would.
Okay, so you're coming in on a Thursday night for a
Thursday
Friday
night.
morning workout.
Thursday night. These are one of the many things that work. So see, here's the thing. I like off season, right?
Yeah.
It's exciting, or it's not exciting, but like you need to set things up for excitement. And so potentially coming to Columbus, meeting your family, getting, putting our heads together and brainstorming, right, about what we have coming up and what we want to accomplish and how we want to attack the off season. Like that's something that I was trying to kind of allude to earlier on, right? Like, how can you set up your off season to a point where you get back from the lull? It's not just the post Super Bowl week lull, but it's yet another dating adventure that's gone sideways, at least for the time being. And so you just got to I felt this exact way, if you remember, coming off New Year's Eve. Now, luckily, I had the postseason to kind of sink my teeth into off that Syracuse dating stunt that I went with. But it's like, how can I continue to kind of ride this wave? A lot of people are telling me to get off the apps. Here's the problem. And we got to go. I know.
We know we have more super chats, by the way.
We do have more super chat. We always do when I go down this road.
Yeah.
Here's the one issue with getting off the dating apps, and I won't go too long on this at all. When you are full-time remote, which I've discussed before, and you have one coworker who is in Columbus, you don't meet people aside from the dog park, and you don't meet people in the dog park this time of year as it is in the winter in Maryland. If I get off the dating apps, I am significantly shrinking my chances of meeting people, and that's just kind of the reality of what's going on.
Got you.
Super chats.
Super chats.
We left off with Paul, and so that brings us to Richard, who would like me to follow Sarah's advice and go to the YSA branch.
I'm telling you, that stands for Young Single Adults. That's where I met my husband.
Okay.
So they have LDS churches, if you're 18 or older and single, they have congregations, we call them wards, congregations just of young single adults. So when I first moved to Baltimore, I went to the one down in Washington, D.C. because it's massive. It's massive. And I remember, I'm not joking, Bobby, after church, because there's so many new people there and it was summer, like they would have people kind of stand up and say what they're doing when they're from. And I was like, oh, I came in for a Ravens internship. I'm telling you, I got 3 guys asking me out on a date after that. I went out on a couple dates. We went to an Orioles game with one and whatever. But anyway, later, because DC was too far, I was going to the Baltimore Singles Adult Ward. And that's where I met my husband. And I had to give a talk when I was first there. He happened to be in the audience and he came to talk to me and I was in a hurry to get out. So he told me I walked right past him. So we had to track down my number. And then he called me that night and we went on a date and that's how we kind of met. And so it's very, very helpful as LDS people to have a very healthy dating life without running into some of the women you're running into that may be just looking for a fun time. Cause most of us are looking to be married and are committed and serious. And when you go to church, you're finding men that way. So you're finding a lot of like-minded people there because it is quality women. But again, there's a serious commitment there.
Richard, send me the address. Sign me up, Richard. Eileen Nolan.
Richard will go to church with you. I'll take the young single adults one here in Columbus when you come. We'll extend you through Sunday.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Eileen
says there's more women in Maryland than just Baltimore, Bobby.
You're right. Yeah. You're right, Eileen. But trying to think of other areas that I could put my pin that Annapolis, but I've tried a lot of these things. And by the way, when you mentioned you just struck a chord when you said that DC was too far. You mentioned that a minute ago. Yeah. And here I am putting my location in Northwest DC relatively often. Nuno Alves says Garrett is not an option. Who can we trade that gives us the same destruction or the opponent? That gives us the same destruction of the offensive opponent or draft someone. Bobby, I was in your shoes. Find love at 39 and my daughter came after. Enjoy the ride. That's awesome. 39 would be 9 years from now for me. So it would require a little bit of patience and live B for you.
Sarah's 45. Where's the fountain of youth?
She's
The
sipping from it.
lights and the camera settings help. Let me just say that first of all. But second of all, here's what's nice about having 4 kids is like you obviously space them out. So I have friends that are like in the 45-year range, but I also have friends in like the 30-year range because my daughter is 7, and so there's younger moms there. And so I always say that the moms that I work out with are 45, but they're actually most of them are 10 years younger than me. So trying to keep up with the young ones, I think help also. So
that's perfect. You surround yourself with people that are like 35. Heck yeah.
For the workouts, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No doubt. All right. That does it for Super Chats, and that does it for the latest on me. Thank you all for your feedback. The search continues. I will not waver, even though I'm in a lull right now. I will not waver. We're back on the dating apps. My location, by the way, is in DC as of right now. That's how discouraged I am with this area. Drop your preferred city for me. Where should I go? Where should I go next this offseason to find Mrs. T? All right, partner, you ready?
I'm ready. That was good football content and then good Bobby dating content. There we go.
Appreciate you as always. You guys can check out the best of section in our playlist. It's the short, condensed best of clips that come from our hour-long or hour-longer pieces of content. Last week, I had a chance to sit down with Josina Anderson, Dennis Pitta, Greg Cosell. Some of this is on my personal channel. Some of this is right here on the Vault. It was a tremendous week. I want to say thank you to you yet again, Sarah, for all the support that you gave me on the back end, editing wise, and a lot of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes that allowed me to be efficient with my time on Radio Row. And a special shout out to Jake Asman as well, who access wise got me in to that convention center all week and just gave us an opportunity to sit down with some great people and meet some others. As I always say, sometimes there's long-term gain. It's not always short-term gain from Radio Row. And I look forward to reaching out to a lot of the people that I met this past week and scheduling stuff for us over the course of this offseason, particularly with some of the free agency plans that we have, draft plans, and things like that. Thanks to Manta Sleep for sponsoring this episode. You guys can go check out and support our brand sponsor by visiting the link that we have included as a pinned comment and also in the show notes. For all 3,100 plus of you right now joining us concurrently, and for Sarah Ellison, I'm Bobby Trossett signing off from this Monday Ravens Lunch Hour live stream. We'll be back with you in under 23 hours from right now for a Tuesday version. We look forward to it. And until then, thanks for joining us here inside the Vault. Talk to you soon.